Because then you might say, right, January through to March is the next period of the year that I'm going to go back into that intentional weight loss phase. And by the end of that time, maybe that's enough. Maybe you've lost all the weight you wanted to. But breaking that sort of 6-month period up over 7 months could be a really smart thing to do. Welcome to the Smart Strength Training Podcast. And today I'm answering a very important question. And that question is now the right time to be dieting? This is a question when a new client starts working with me and they say, Andy, I want to lose some body fat. The next thing, or one of the things I'll certainly ask them is, have you thought about what's coming up in the coming weeks and months? Because if you're facing a lot of challenges just that life's going to throw at you, it's not impossible to stay on track, but it's certainly important to recognize that you're going to be struggling more so to stay on track with your diet. I think it's really important to distinguish those that are not talking about making changes to the way you eat to improve the overall quality and the health benefits of your diet. That is something that you can do at any time of the year. What I'm stating is that there is a difference between just eating healthily and eating with the focused intention of purposely losing body fat or body weight. Like I said, I think if you're going to make changes to your diet to improve the quality of it, you can do that at any time. That's not going to be too much of a sort of mental challenge to do. I also think it's important to have those healthy habits in place before entering into a diet phase, because the statement I've made quite a few times in this podcast already is weight loss really isn't the goal. Staying weight stable is the goal. So having a good base of a healthy diet to return to after a weight loss phase is a really smart, I would argue, like super, super important thing to do. So what do I mean by a good base? I would say that generally you center as many of your meals as possible around whole food, minimally processed, minimally refined foods. You get plenty of fruit and veg in across your day, and you're prioritizing protein in the majority of your meals. If you're doing that, I think it's really smart. Then you can go into these sort of like purposeful diet phases. And why healthy eating alone won't be enough to make you lose body fat is because to sustain a period of lower energy intake, you need to be thinking about being diligent on social life and your sort of social interactions, stressful situations, maybe with work, family pressure that you might have, holidays, that list goes on. Because everyone, I think most people understand we need to be in an energy deficit. But what's more important is not that MyFitnessPal tells you need to eat 1,600 calories. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is if you intend to lose 4 to 5 kilos, that means you need to sustain that energy deficit for between 2 to 3 months. So that's going to capture quite a lot of your life. So therefore, social life, stressful situations, family pressure, and holidays, like I mentioned, they are things that are going to trip you up. For example, Christmas is not a million miles away from here. If you have this sort of job or life that involves a lot of socializing, lots of events and canapes and drinks and entertaining, or let's say you're away with family for Christmas, but also that extended period around Christmas and the New Year, is it realistic that you're going to be able to stick to an energy deficit across that time? Maybe, but I'd probably argue that it's not the best time to be doing it. Another time for a lot of people, a lot of families, are the summer holidays. When the children are off, there's more kids' parties, there's more things to go to. Potentially that is not the best time of the year to be looking at dieting. Again, you can do it. I'm just saying be aware of the challenges. Another great example is for those whose jobs center around year ends or financial year ends. That can be very stressful, and it potentially isn't the best time of year to be thinking about it. But ultimately, what I want to do is make sure people just consider the time of year they're thinking about. And why is this really important? Because dieting for the goal of fat loss, like I mentioned, isn't the same as eating healthily. And I'd always urge someone to center their diet around eating healthily. If you're trying to lose fat, we need to go that extra step to try and control your caloric intake on average across that sustained period of time. That being said, if you are the sort of person that's sort of well-versed on being in an energy deficit, you know what to do, and you're used to sort of going into one and coming back out of it, then potentially these lifestyle factors and the things that are coming up for your social life won't be a major issue. But if you're not experienced at it, then that's where I think it's important to recognize the challenges, because there's a few habits you're going to need to learn whilst trying to be successful with your energy deficit. So that's going to be things like potentially keeping your day-to-day meals fairly consistent. That means you're not having to think too much about your calories day to day. If you're kind of like eating the same 2 to 3 breakfasts, 3 to 5 lunches, like 3 to 10 evening meals, you can roughly know where you're at with those. That takes a lot of the thinking around away. Things like cutting down and eliminating snacks, or certainly having swaps that you can easily use to lower the total energy that you're consuming. I think auditing your home cooked meals to reduce energy, things like not using oils, not using shop bought sauces, and using more home cooked sauces, really smart thing to do. And then this is really important. So planning that week ahead, potentially a little bit of prepping of dishes as well can be really useful. And then planning for any social activities. You need to have a framework in place so you know what to do if you are eating out, especially if you end up eating out 3 times in 1 week, because you might need to look at the restaurant menu, you might need to pre-set your meals beforehand, or you might need to choose a couple of those meals to maybe drive to and not drink, and set some expectation around it. Because energy accumulates, and it can do so quite sneakily. So if you're not thinking about those extra edges of your diet, then you're going to find you're consuming more energy than potentially you think you are. And that's enough to slow the weight loss right down, potentially slow it right down to the point that the sort of scales and technology you're using to measure your progress won't pick it up. And it feels like you're stagnating and you're you're completely plateauing with your weight loss. So again, that's why it becomes really important to ask that question: is now the right time to be dieting? Have a look at the part of the year that you're in and think about setting yourself up for success, or certainly making sure you're not instantly setting yourself up for failure from the get-go. I know this is coming out in November, but I think always around sort of September through to November actually being quite good periods of a year to diet. Not for everyone, but I think you get summer out the way. A lot of people want to have a good crack at their diet before Christmas. So it becomes a really nice sort of time bucket to focus on. Do that diet phase from sort of September through to the end of November, and then effectively taking Christmas off and having a diet break, trying to stay weight stable over Christmas. Now, I've done a podcast episode already on staying weight stable, so make sure you check that out. But taking Christmas off to focusing on the sort of habits around staying weight stable is a really great tool, not necessarily Christmas, but any time of the year off. And learning how to stay weight stable is a really great time of the year. So I like the use of those intermittent diet breaks throughout a weight loss phase, because then you might say, right, January through to March is the next period of the year that I'm going to go back into that intentional weight loss phase. And by the end of that time, maybe that's enough. Maybe you've lost all the weight you wanted to. But breaking that sort of 6-month period up over 7 months could be a really smart thing to do. And we know that most people find it hard to sustain an energy deficit for much more than about 3 months at a time. Certainly, if you're intending to be in a diet phase for 6 months, if you've got a fairly robust weight loss goal, that's going to cover so much of the year. And people often lose of motivation, or they certainly lose the intent that is there at the start when you're 3-6 months down the line. So sometimes it can be really nice to sort of break it up into sort of more manageable chunks, thinking about those timeframes around it. Because let's be really honest, if you are having to think about when you're out in restaurants, looking at restaurant menus, it can become quite fatiguing. So it can be quite nice just to have a bit of time off having to do that. And if you have a more robust weight loss goal, it may be better to think of it in these sort of 8-week chunks, but then broken up across sort of 1 to 2 years. Now, let that sink in for a minute. I just said years. And I know for some people that's not going to sit so well, because obviously this industry talks about weeks and lose weight fast. Now, it's not impossible to do it quicker. There's loads of people that have done it quicker. I think it's just important to point out there are going to be multiple hurdles trying to do a sustained fat loss phase for a long period of time. So it might be smarter to break it up. Maybe let's go back to that idea of the run into Christmas. You might have 15 kilos to lose, and you might try and lose 5 kilos on the run into Christmas. You stabilize your weight over Christmas. You might then lose another 5 kilos in the run up through spring. And then you hit the summer, you stay weight stable through the summer. You get to the next Christmas period, the next September, and you diet through that period. So it takes you just over a year potentially to lose the weight. Maybe, especially if, let's say, over summer, you gained a few kilos, so you had to do like a mini cut in the new year. But that's a much more practical approach. Certainly, I think you'd have a better chance of doing it if you took that approach than just trying to lose 15 kilos in one hit. Because statistically, you're about as likely as winning the lottery as you are losing 15 kilos in one hit. So I think just having a little bit of a strategy with these sort of interspersed periods where you do stay weight stable, you learn the habits around eating at maintenance can be really, really smart. But a final note, that no strategy comes without its issues. Obviously, if you go all in on that 15 kilos for 6 months, good luck sticking to it. But if you think about what I've just stated, having those interspersed periods of maintenance phase, that can be quite daunting. Sometimes people, they think they're going to gain weight, so they end up still dieting and being in a deficit, and they run out of steam mentally to keep going. If people take too long a break with their diet phases, their maintenance phases over summer, maybe they lose that intention, that real focus that they had at the start. Potentially they gain some of that weight back as well. But I think it's important that I just explain this to you so you walk into it with open eyes. There's no strategy that doesn't have pros and cons. And it's really naive to think there is a best strategy without any issues whatsoever. Of course, there's always going to be some kind of challenge that you're going to face. But if you understand those challenges, then you have half a chance of being able to deal with them. So if you understand what the hell is Andy talking about, well, he's talking about eating energy maintenance. That's a really important thing to understand. As I mentioned, I've done a podcast episode on that, so you can listen to that and be right. Now I understand what he means by these maintenance periods. We understand, or you now know, that the motivation could massively dip when you're returning back into your second or potentially third diet phase. So what can you do about that? Well, you could book something at the end. You could book some sort of holiday, weekend away, treat or something to just dangle a little bit of a carrot at the end to keep you excited. And of course, the biggest issue could be what happens if during a maintenance phase I gain that weight back. Well, then you need to make sure that you're diligently weighing yourself throughout that maintenance phase to make sure you don't do it. You don't gain that weight back. So all of those things are 100% manageable when you walk into that strategy with the knowledge of the benefits, but also the issues with it. And it is definitely the sort of thing that potentially is a nice idea to work with a qualified coach that's been through this process before and can guide you through that process, because then it's going to be better for obviously accountability and for support. So hopefully that was useful. And I would love you to think about that question the next time you intend to go into a diet phase. Is this really the best time to be doing it?